Liberian voters prepare to go to the polls in the next test of the country's democracy. It's a story of joy and resilience as a school in Kenya uplifts children with physical disabilities, and a Zimbabwean artist explores her identity via her ancestry. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Hundreds of opposition supporters marching through Kenya's capital toward the election board headquarters on Monday were met by men in plainclothes firing shots into the air. Nairobi police on horseback setting up roadblocks to prevent demonstrators from accessing certain roads. Uniformed police could be seen firing tear gas at opposition protesters as they demanded reforms ahead of the October 26th repeat presidential election. Opposition members of parliament say they will boycott the upcoming ballot unless reforms are made. Last month, the Supreme Court nullified incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta's August win over opposition leader Raila Odinga due to procedural irregularities. Last month, also, Kenya's chief prosecutor ordered investigations into 11 election board officials, as well as a lawyer who worked for Odinga. Now, to West Africa, voters in Liberia, Africa's oldest republic, head to the presidential and parliamentary polls on Tuesday. 20 candidates are vying to replace President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who steps down from her second term at the end of the year. Now, the top campaign issues include infrastructure and healthcare, both challenges that were laid bare by the devastating Ebola epidemic that ended in June of 2016. In the first of our two reports, reporter Monique John in Monrovia previews the election and tells us about Liberia's female candidates.
Liberia is on the verge of electing its next president and House of Representatives. The election is expected to mark the country's first peaceful democratic handover of power since 1944. 20 candidates are in the race to replace President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, while almost 1,000 candidates are competing for 73 legislative seats.
Poverty is the greatest problem in Liberia.
We're looking for people who are educated, who are experienced, who can bring infrastructure development and also bring education to us in Liberia.
One candidate, Charles Brumskeen, the president pro tem of the Senate under President Charles Taylor's administration, is on his third bid for president.
I have the experience, the relevant experience. I have the education. I have the integrity. Vote for Brumskeen and come here and let us change this country.
Other contenders include Benoni Yuri, the founder of the nationwide cell network Lone Star, and former maritime minister under Taylor's administration, as well as George Weah, the current senator for Montserrado and famous soccer star. Weah's immense popularity has brought out vast crowds at his various campaign events. Current Vice President Joseph Boakai is also running. The Unity Party candidate says he plans to continue policies from the Sirleaf administration. Boakai says being president will give him the authority to demonstrate his leadership skills. Alexander Cummings, a newcomer to Liberian politics and a former Coca-Cola executive, is running for president with the Alternative National Congress Party.
Together, we are committed to the Liberian people and nobody else. I want to put the corrupt politicians on record. Their time is over.
Skeptics say his extensive time spent working in America put him out of touch with ordinary Liberians. Supporters, however, like Cummings' corporate experience. Voters are transparent about their frustration with politicians, but still have faith in their chosen candidates.
All our leaders, every time they come to power, they will say all kind of good things that will encourage us to vote for them. But as soon as we vote for them, everything that they promise can be a lie.
This Brumskeen supporter says,
because I like him and no one supporting him will do better thing for me and you'll do better thing for my children.
With a population of about 4 million people, Liberia has just over 2 million registered voters that will vote at the country's 5,000 polling places. Official results will be announced October 25th. Patricia Titi Delani is among 162 women running for office this year in Liberia, a record high. Delani is seeking a seat in the House of Representatives.
I don't have a degree from college, no. I'm a market woman and I'm a high school graduate.
Women currently hold just 9 of the 73 seats in Liberia's House of Representatives.
The men have failed us. So with the women, this time around, we want to do better than the men.
The gender imbalance is particularly glaring, considering that Liberia has been led by Africa's first female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, for the past 12 years.
Politics is it's scary for most women. You need a lot of money if you're going to run for office, and it could be a little intimidating at times. There has been a lot of intimidation through the process, a lot of attacks, a lot of manipulation, but I'm strong. I'm a strong woman. I stand for what I believe in.
Magdala Cooper is the only woman running for president this year. She faces 19 male challengers. 6 women are on the ballot as vice presidential candidates, including Audrey Smith Forbes.
I want to say thanks to our president, Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, for paving the way for women to build confidence, in their role and see the importance of their role in society. Women issues have been put on the back burner for so many years, and with women involved at the highest level, brings their issues to the table as well.
Issues like healthcare and gender-based violence have been front and center as the candidates court female voters, encouraging them to make their voices heard at the polls on October 10th. Monique John reporting for VOA News from Monrovia.
And now to East Africa. At least 7 people were killed on Monday when Al-Shabaab terrorists attacked a checkpoint in Somalia's semi-autonomous Puntland region. The region's police says the fighters also ambushed officers rushing in to help colleagues on the outskirts of the city of Bosaso. Al-Shabaab says it seized the checkpoint, then left, but the police insist they fought off the assault. Attacks are relatively rare in Puntland, which has its own government and security forces patrolling its territory on the northeastern tip of the Horn of Africa. While in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a United Nations peacekeeper was killed and dozens others were wounded when Ugandan rebels attacked 2 military bases in the country's northeast. The mission, known as MONUSCO, deployed attack helicopters in response to the raid. Local sources say the army was battling militants along the main road leading from North Kivu province's Beni territory to the Ugandan border. The fighting, which began this weekend, is a fresh outbreak of violence for a region plagued by ethnic tensions and massacres that killed more than 800 people between 2014 and 2016. Well, nearly 2 weeks after Chad was added to an amended U.S. travel ban list, questions continue about why the African country was included. VOA's Mariama Diallo looks at the implications for Chad.
Given its scope of counterterrorism work with its regional and international partners, Chad being added to a U.S. travel ban list continue to raise questions. Raymond Gilpin is the Dean of the Africa Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University in Washington.
Chad has had a leadership role in the multinational joint task force for the Lake Chad Basin area, has 700 troops. Chad has also participated in a number of European and American-led counterterrorism exercises. 2016, just last year, Chad had the presidency of the G5 Sahel.
It appears, at least on the surface, Gilpin says, that Chad has been a willing and able U.S. partner.
It's difficult to see what Chad did not do and Sudan did do that saw them one country off the list and the other country on the list. So this has been perplexing, not just in Chad, but across the continent, because people are asking questions about the extent to which partnership and international initiatives, could work in your favor when it comes to something as important and as crucial as the travel ban to the United States.
A country being on a travel ban list can send negative signals to investors who, in general, are spooked by insecurity, experts say. Brian McCullough is the co-chairman of the U.S.-Chad Investment Council. He came back from Chad 3 days before the travel ban was issued and says the feeling in Chad is that a friend just betrayed you. But while it's understandable, he says the focus should be somewhere else.
The overall commercial and diplomatic relationship is strong, and it's still predicated on the cooperation that the United States and Chad have had over the past decades. And so, I was just at State Department, and they're looking forward to working with Chad on getting whatever it is that they need to do to lift the ban as quickly as possible. But then, of course, they're still maintaining their portfolio of security, humanitarian and business relationships that they already have, and looking to strengthen those.
He also attended the launch of Chad's new 2017-2021 National Development Plan last month in Paris.
They're looking to seriously increase a lot of economic activity, the business climate, improve really the environment for the private sector.
How is that all going to play out after this ban? Many are asking. The language issued by the White House says Chad is an important and valuable counterterrorism partner, but it also adds that Chad does not adequately share public safety and terrorism-related information. For that reason, the entry into the U.S. of nationals of Chad on B-1 and B-2 visas is hereby suspended. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the United States has lifted long-standing sanctions against Sudan. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert says the sanctions relief is in recognition of Sudan's sustained positive actions, but that more improvement is needed. She says Sudan is making progress fighting terrorism and easing humanitarian distress. The East African nation is also promising not to pursue arms deals with North Korea. The U.S. decision marks a major turnaround for the government of President Omar Hassan al-Bashir, who once hosted Osama bin Laden and is wanted by the International Criminal Court on charges of orchestrating genocide in Darfur. In a process that was started by former U.S. President Barack Obama, President Donald Trump removed a U.S. trade embargo and other penalties that had effectively cut Sudan off from much of the global financial system. Now, 1 week after the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history, debate is raging once again on whether to impose new restrictions on firearms. As viewers Michael Bowman reports, gun control efforts have repeatedly failed in Congress, but a new effort is underway to ban an accessory that made the Las Vegas shooter's firearms far more deadly than current U.S. law intended.
Virginia Tech, Newtown, Connecticut, Charleston, South Carolina, San Bernardino, California, Orlando, Florida. Every mass shooting in recent years prompted grief, anger, and calls for action. But none led Congress to pass any gun control laws. As mourning continues in Las Vegas,
we're joined together in sadness, shock, and grief for the fallen, the injured, and their families.
Bills have been drafted in both houses of Congress to ban so-called bump stocks, devices that allow a semi-automatic rifle to fire bullets almost as quickly as a fully automatic machine gun. America's biggest gun rights lobbying group, the National Rifle Association, raised eyebrows last week by signaling support for additional regulations on devices like bump stocks. Gun control advocates were not satisfied.
Regulation is a path to delay, not action. There must be a ban on bump stocks.
For now, the White House is not commenting on any specific gun control proposal.
We want to be part of that conversation. We want to gather more information. We're going to continue to do that over the coming days.
And the Senate's top Republican signaled he is not eager to bring up gun legislation for a vote.
Look, the investigation's not even been completed, and I think it's premature to be discussing legislative solutions, if there are any.
Meanwhile, a larger debate is getting rehashed yet again. Does gun control stem violence or restrict Americans' constitutional right to bear arms?
People like to hunt, and people have the right to own guns, but not weapons of war. We have ways that we can reduce this violence.
The Second Amendment is not just for hunting. And, you hear that a lot. Oh, it's for hunting. That's not for hunting. The Second Amendment was put in place to be able to overthrow tyranny, and with weapons of war at the time.
No one expects sweeping new gun control laws to be enacted. But a limited and targeted measure like restricting bump stocks could provide a rare moment for polarized sides of the gun debate to agree on something. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
But I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now coming up, a little joy goes a long way at a school for the disabled in Kenya. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Joy Town is one of only 5 secondary schools in Kenya that admit students with physical disabilities. Now, despite the many challenges students face, the school is living up to its name. Africa 54's Esther Githu-Ewart visited Joy Town and brings us this story of resilience.
Thika Town is a 30-minute drive from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. And tucked away just meters from Thika Town on this dusty road lies Joy Town, the school 240 students call home. The principal, Leah Kamonye, says there's still considerable stigma associated with physical disabilities. She tells us the story of one student who was even shunned by his own family.
We had a student who did not have disabilities here, and he was from a broken home, and we even housed him in the school. Even when the others go home, he would be left here. He was staying with some well-wishers, but just by the fact that he came to Joy Town, they rejected him that he is going to bring the spirits of the disabilities to the family.
Merab Imai, a teacher at the school, has physical challenges of her own. She's most worried about students with spina bifida, which affects their bladder control and bowel movements.
This child keeps on moving out of class to the washrooms to make themselves to be neat, to be tidy, to be able to attend class. And many a times, so the teacher gets that distraction, the child has gone out. Sometimes you're forced to pause, maybe to wait for this child to be able to receive the message you want to pass on.
In another classroom, teacher Sabina Kavila asks students to recap their last lesson. Students use their toes and mouths to write. Some have cerebral palsy, a disorder that affects balance and movement of muscle tone. The principal says they've lost some students to various forms of cancer and muscular dystrophy, a disease that causes progressive weakness and loss of muscle mass.
We have never lost a student to school fees. If a student comes in Form 1 on a wheelchair with the muscular dystrophy, we sort of assure they will not complete Form 4.
Martin Marcia, a senior at the school, says most students would like to share their experiences with students elsewhere who have similar challenges.
Some of them are like, why don't we go outside the country, like in America, and go and see these people, like how they do their things, and how they normally do their normal activities. For example, even I'm sure in America we have people who have special needs like us.
The principal says Joy Town was not designed to accommodate the physical challenges of students.
The resources that are needed to make their life livable here, their life comfortable, we are far short of that. There are some students that we actually spoon feed. They cannot hold a spoon, but they are expected to write down what they know, because that is what will be assessed.
Are the teachers specially trained to handle these children with disabilities?
The majority of the teachers are now trained, but they get trained after they are here. So for Joy Town, you are not required to have special education before you come. But once you are here, you find the need.
At the time of the interview, Faith Wairimo, the school's vice president, had just had one of her legs amputated. Nevertheless, she is upbeat and loves music.
I like to be a musician.
Can you sing something for me?
Yes.
Sing.
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart, 'cause you're the one that guides my heart.
Martin Marcia, too, has talents of his own.
This is some of my artworks. Here is the current president, President Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president Kibaki, and Martin Luther King.
Joytown students say they don't want sympathy. They want recognition and a chance to prove that physical disability is certainly not inability to succeed.
Well, joining me now for more insight on Kenya's Joytown School is Africa 54's Esther Githuwat. Esther, what a real touching story that is. But one thing that strikes me is how cheerful these kids look. How was it like for you being there with them?
I was very emotional. When I got there, first of all, I wanted to go to the primary school, which is equal to the elementary school here. But the kids are so young, and I thought, well, I have to have, the parents' permission to be able to do the interview. So the ones in the high school are a little bit older, and so because some of them don't get to school when they're supposed to be because they have to kind of be able to move around. And most of them come from very poor families. And when I got there, I didn't know really what to expect. When I saw the kids, when I saw others who are not even able to move, wheeling others to get to the bathrooms or to get back to the class, that kind of really touched me. It was very emotional for me, to tell you the truth, even for the cameraman. And but this story, these kids have talents.
Man, it's amazing. They have talent, and you can see the different forms of disability.
Yes.
These are our kids. But the question is, what did you gather in terms of how is the government helping kids and people with disability, especially those who have to go to school?
I have to be honest with you, I was furious. I checked, I Googled, I talked to the principal, and they said there are no clear policies that help Kenyan students with disabilities to be able to go to school. Imagine Kenya has 48 million people. And, well, there's a huge chunk of these people that have disabilities. Most of them come from poor families. You had the principal say some of them are not even accepted back in their homes. So you think about a policy that is just on paper, that is not implemented. You don't see these students going to schools. The day that we went to shoot this story, there were parents crying because the principal could not allow their kids to join the school. Why? She can only take 240 students. That is the capacity. She didn't know what to do.
Because they can't go to normal schools. There are no facilities.
There are no facilities for them, and there are only 5 schools in Kenya for such kids. And there are others coming up, but, well, we are yet to see how much they can do.
You mentioned this, that the kids don't want pity. They don't want sympathy. What do they want from the government, from
They want support. They want clear policies. For example, if you look at the school, it wasn't designed to be able to help them be able to access places. If you look at the bathrooms, let me tell you, I personally thought I'm going to mobilize people in Thika Town to just come and help them to clean. In regular schools, you have even students doing some cleaning of their own. These kids cannot. Now think about being examined like any other students who has no physical disability. And this is a national exam where some of them are writing with their mouth, others with their toes, and others can't move. Sometimes the pen falls off.
They're going to do the same test as everybody else.
They will be tested like everybody else, and nowhere will it be written, this child has a physical disability. So when you're marking this exam, bear that in mind. No. So they end up nowhere.
Thank you very much, Esther, for doing this. It's a tough one. We just hope somebody out there, somebody in the government is listening and they will do something about this.
Need to do something about it.
Thank you very much. While at Africa 54, Esther Githuwat. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, a Zimbabwean artist wows audiences in one of the world's elite art markets. We'll be right back.
If
you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Liberia, candidates prepare for the first round of a presidential election this Tuesday in what will be the country's first democratic power transfer in decades. In Ethiopia, the Oromo people seek refuge in the city of Adama after being forced by locally ethnically Somali government to flee their homes following several deadly clashes. In Ghana, citizens urge their government to improve safety at fuel stations after 4 people died this weekend. In Kenya, hundreds of Nairobi demonstrators encountered tear gas and police blockades as they demand reforms ahead of the country's repeat presidential election. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. In a designer-obsessed world, counterfeits are running amok. A New York startup, Entropy, has found a way to fight the fake goods with a handheld microscope camera that lets users with their smartphones detect the difference between real designer luxury handbags and frauds. The creators went into retail stores buying and returning handbags just so they could scan what the real bags look like on a microscopic level. Counterfeit and pirated goods accounted for up to 2.5% of world trade, or as much as $461 billion. Well, next up, it's not often that a young, recently graduated African art student gets a solo exhibition at a gallery in central London. But that is exactly what Zimbabwean-born Kudzanai Violet Hwami has accomplished. 11 of our works were recently put on sale at the Tyburn Gallery to an encouraging response from art lovers. Kudzanai Violet Hwami's work was inspired by a family photo album. At the opening of the exhibition, the crowd was able to see reflections of African life, both in Zimbabwe and South Africa, where the original pictures were taken. Well, and finally, fans dressed to impress streamed into the Javits Center to celebrate the opening day of New York Comic Con. San Diego in California is considered the flagship of popular convention circuit, but more than 100 events from Arizona to New York hold some version of a Comic Con. New York Comic Con's website boasts that it's one of the largest comic gatherings in the country, with more than 185,000 fans attending in 2016. The annual event ended on Sunday, and that is what is trending today. Well, that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight. That's all for now. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to